Well, this is Martin Dreyling from University of Munich. I would like to share with you the news being presented at EHA 25 virtual. And in fact, it's fair to say that there are, this was a big year for Hodgkin, but it's fair to say there are practice-changing news when it comes to the clinical care of indolent lymphoma. And I really would like to discuss with you, let's say, the top 3 highlights from my personal opinion. And I will start with, let's say, you might say a basic theme. There was a huge international trial, the ASPEN trial, comparing 2 kind of BTK inhibitors in Waldenström. So we do know that this is a very decent treatment, well tolerated in general, but we also know that Waldenström patients normally are elderly and in fact more vulnerable. And specifically in elderly male, we do know that, for example, atrial fibrillation is a quite frequent comorbidity. And that might be really, hampered by the application of BTK inhibitors. So what's the design of the study? It's a simple design, head-to-head comparison of patients with confirmed Waldenström being treated either with Ibrutinib, the first-in-class BTK inhibitor, and compared to a second-generation one. And really based on the fact that the Zanotoprim has a more specific outline in preclinical investigations, and it was postulated that it's also more efficient. So what is the result of the head-to-head comparison? Very simply been said, excellent results, 90% PFS after 1 year, with no major difference between the 2 compounds when it comes to efficacy. However, when you have a close look at toxicity, you see a significant reduction of side effects, and namely the typical atrial fibrillation, bleeding, which occurred more frequently in the Ibrutinib arm. To summarize, you might say, well, it's a negative trial because there's no advantage in efficacy. I think it's clinically a very relevant one because, as I said, these elderly patients are more vulnerable, so really bleeding atrial fibrillation is a major challenge for these patients, which really supports the application of second-generation BTK inhibitors. Now I would like to switch to a more aggressive, quote, indolent lymphoma, which is Manta Cell. The current status so far, in fact, is that chemotherapy is part of standard of care for first line, whereas in relapsed disease, the targeted approaches are more and more prominent, and the front runner of these is really BTK inhibition. However, based on the more aggressive nature of Manta Cell, we do believe that a monotherapy alone is not sufficient. Now, Stephen LeGoul and Simon Rule, they took the challenge to really move a combination into first line. In fact, they went for a triple combination, which has been already established in CLL, which is Ibrutinib, venetoclax, plus obinutuzumab, an optimized second-generation anti-CD20 antibody. What are the results? Well, pretty convincing when it comes to efficacy. There's only 1 patient progressing under this therapy, and really after 1-2 years still the vast majority of patients is still in remission. So this is very promising. And what is also very important, it's very well tolerated. So this is, I think, the base for a huge number of trials which will finally challenge chemotherapy in first-line treatment of mantle cell lymphoma. And I should add, the most important thing about this trial is mantle cell lymphoma is heterogeneous concerning the aggressiveness. And you can really pinpoint that by blastoid histology, Ki67 or P53. And in fact, P53 was deleted in 40% of this, though small study, and still this high response rate. So I do believe, yes, there's something in it, and specifically for these high-risk cases, this might be the future standard approaches. However, this has to be tested in randomized larger studies. And finally, what is, well, it's no more the new movement because it's already established in relapsed aggressive lymphoma. What about immunotherapy? And CAR T cells are, if you want, so the Ferrari of immunotherapy, and meanwhile already registered in relapsed diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And now we have the results of a huge phase 2 trial with more than 80 patients of follicular lymphoma. And what are the results? Well, response rates really high, above 80%. And just to let you know, this is a multi-center international trial, and therefore these monocenter experience by Penn University are really confirmed. So exactly the same results as Stephen Schuster in his initial New England journal has reported. What is also very encouraging, ongoing remission. So after 2 years, more than 70% of patients are still in remission. Excellent data and rather well tolerated. Infusion-related side effects only in the one-digit percentage rate, and also neurological toxicities below 20%. So for me, what does that mean? Well, you might previously have said CAR T cells is only reserved for aggressive lymphoma, but here we have a higher risk patient population, median prior treatment lines in the range of 3. So not much is left in these patients, and with this one-shot therapy, you really achieve long-term remissions. So I think this is really a time of change for hematology, not only in indolent lymphoma, but in general, where we more and more move away from standard chemotherapy, still very active, but toxic, and specifically the high-risk patients, I think, will specifically benefit from these new targeted approaches.